Just like scale degrees, triads can have a feeling of stability or instability too. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it, because triads are simply made up of scale degrees. For instance, let's go back to that one chord at the beginning of my arrangement. And we said that felt like a very stable place. And in fact, we have the one chord in the very first measure, and we have the one chord in the very last measure. And look what makes up the one chord. Well, we have the first scale degree. The one, the tonic scale degree, is right in this chord. Plus the 3, which is a fairly stable scale degree, and the 5, which is also a fairly stable scale degree. So the one chord is made up of 3 very stable sounding scale degrees. Let's contrast that with the chord that we had in the 7th measure, that chord that felt unfinished when we ended on it. That's the 5 chord. And let's investigate what scale degrees make up the 5 chord. Well, the bottom scale degree is 5, which is a fairly stable scale degree. But then we have the 7th scale degree and the 2nd scale degree. Scale degree 2 is pretty unstable, and then scale degree 7, remember we had a special name for scale degree 7, we called that the leading tone. The leading tone. Scale degree 7 is maybe the most unstable sounding scale degree of all. That's the scale degree that feels like it just can't rest until it gets back to 1. So the 5 chord has 2 fairly unstable scale degrees in it. So why wouldn't it feel like an unstable chord in relationship to the 1? That gives you at least a little bit of a taste of how we can start to think about chords in relationship to one another. Now, just like we gave each of the notes of the scale, the first scale degree, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, a name, we also apply those names to the chords that are built on that scale degree. So, for instance, we called scale degree 1 the tonic. Tonic, again, just being sort of a fancy way of talking about that scale degree being the home base. Well, we also give the chord that is built on scale degree 1 the name tonic. So very often you'll hear the 1 chord referred to as the tonic chord. The chord that's built on, or the triad that's built on scale degree 2, we call the supertonic. On scale degree 3, the mediant, so the 3 chord is also called the mediant. The 3rd scale degree is called the mediant, but the 3 chord is also called the mediant chord. The 4 is known as the subdominant. The 5 is known as the dominant. The 6 as the submediant. The 7 as the leading tone triad. And when we get back to 1, we're back at the tonic. So very often, you'll hear these chords referred to by these names. In fact, really, once we get into it, you probably will hear these names more in relationship to the chords than you will to the scale degrees. It's pretty common, not just in music theory, but in everyday life, at least everyday musical life, that we hear the 1 chord being referred to as the tonic, and the 5 chord as being referred to as the dominant. In fact, those 2 words, tonic and dominant, you will use on a pretty regular basis in your musical life. There's a lot more to say about this topic, and I have not even scratched the surface. This is one of those topics that is worthy of a lifetime of study. But I just wanted to introduce you to some of these ideas as we're talking about triads, and we'll come back to them and hit on them in a little bit more depth later on in the course, as you will in upcoming semesters and upcoming classes that you take in harmony. But that's a little bit of an introduction to chords and chord functions and how we're going to start to think about how they work.